In 3 weeks since we last met about this class, going to do some very quick review. By the way, there are 2 sheets of paper back there that you probably won't need until next Wednesday, but go ahead and get those if you haven't already. And then there's a copy of the answer sheet. Hopefully you have your answer sheet with you from 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, last time we met. And we'll go over some of those things. But we wanted to just do a quick recap of what we've discussed so far in our last class to bring us up to where we're going to be. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm going to skip through some of the materials. So it's interesting to have in the back of your mind. You don't really have to know it, but it does help. So why is this era so important? We're talking about the intertestamental period, those 400 years between the close of the Old Testament and then when Jesus came. Well, there's a lot of key developments that happened during this time that really set the stage for the world into which Jesus was born. And that's kind of what we're doing right now, is just setting the stage. It helps us understand the situation that the Jews were in during the time of Jesus, and why you have some of the attitudes that you had, and why you had some of the infighting that you had, what they were expecting, what was in their mindset. Judaism was transformed. And then also to see the hand of God as far as providence. Then we talked about the Persian Empire. That was the time, remember, right after Nebuchadnezzar. And we talked about the 3 important developments during the Persian period. This is probably on your answer sheet as well. The rise of the synagogue, the oral tradition, and the establishment of the Aramaic language for both business and international dealings and relations. That was big. That helped set the stage for, it's hard to do business with somebody when you can't understand what they're saying. And it's hard to teach somebody something when they can't understand you and you can't understand them. So those were some important things that happened during that. Oops. Then after that, this is all recap, we talked about Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic period. Now, keep that word in mind. And what we're going to do periodically is we're going to recap. I've talked to Dennis, who is just the master at this, drilling things into our minds so we won't forget them. We're going to do that periodically throughout this. Here's one of the words I want us to drill into our minds, that Hellenistic. Hellenistic. That'll be something that really has a lot to do with why Jesus was treated one way by a certain group of people, why he was treated another way by another group of people. So just remember that word. But that was Alexander the Great in the Hellenistic period. Remember, he was taught by Aristotle and inspired by Achilles. 13 years, he conquered and controlled virtually all the former Persian Empire, plus some more. He did that at a young age. Does anybody remember how old he was when he died? I thought he was 33. Was that right or wrong? Anybody else know? Somebody Google it. How old was Alexander the Great when he died? We should ask his mother. She'd know. 33? All right. Old brother Google got it again, didn't he? Alexander the Great. Yeah, there's one more. Okay. Oh, yeah. 331 to 167. And that's the Hellenistic period. Yep. Jews were given the same, this is the good thing about him, Jews were given the same relative freedoms as they were under the Persians. You saw his hopes and dreams, but he died before he could make those a reality. But here's something important. There was a voluntary dispersion of many of the Jews under his reign. In other words, they had been exiled before, taken away into captivity. Now, some of them went on their own accord. Hey, we can make more money down here in Alexandria. Let's all go there. Several of us go there. And the largest Jewish community outside of Palestine developed in Alexandria of Egypt. So you might be thinking, well, why in the world does this matter? We're Christians, not Jews. But when the Jews went other places, what did they establish? Synagogues. And when missionaries would go and make their trips, where was the first place that they would visit? The synagogues, you see? So that's why we're talking about some of these things. And again, I can't remember exactly where we stopped. On your answer sheet, those of you who have your answer sheet, what's the next question that we didn't answer? What is the question? We were on number 5? What's number 5? During the Greeks' rule. Okay, well, here we go. Important standards of living and administrative efficiency. Improved standards of living and administrative efficiency. The empire came to be more urban rather than rural centered. You know, back in the day, I'm talking back in the day, way, way back in the day, during this time, it was a very agricultural community, nation, but here it became more urban centered. And then this next one is Hellenization. Did we describe and define that word, what it means to be Hellenists in our last class? Modernize. It's not just that they spoke Greek, but they dressed like the Greeks. They took the culture of the Greeks. And they, for all practical purposes, they were still Jews, but they looked and acted more like the Greeks. Now, stop right there. We're going to draw a pin right here. And I'm trying to think maybe who our arch enemy, but just say back in the 90s, those of us who were there in the 90s, or the 80s, I guess. Got to go back to the 80s. Russia was our chief adversary. You know, it was the United States and Russia. So imagine if Russia comes in and conquers us, and you know we are Americans. We have pride and American values and all of these things. We want to stay as much American as we can. We're not going to let them show us, you know, make us do what they want us to do. We're not going to become communists and all of this. But then you have some who start adapting their customs, start adapting their language, start acting like Russians. Now, what's a true patriot going to think of that group of people? You're a traitor. How could you do that? You're an American. You ought to act like an American. Now, when you throw in religion on top of that, can you see why it might be a little volatile? And why there might be some animosity through these people, and we're going to show that. So, the Hellenization, that's big. And then the Greek language. The Greek language, this is an important one. It was the language of business. It is the Greek that the New Testament was written in, Koine Greek, which means vulgar or common, just the common. Well, not vulgar in a dirty way or anything like that, but just the common. Everybody would speak that. Matter of fact, it became so widespread that the Jews outside of Israel needed to have the Hebrew Bible translated into Greek so they could read it. Now think about that. In that period of time, so many people started reading and writing Greek that the little children started getting trained in that, and then you had a generation that couldn't read their own language. So they had to translate the Bible into that. And this version, by the way, is what Jesus often quotes in the New Testament. That's interesting, isn't it? Are versions inspired? Jesus quoted from them, didn't he? So then after that, you had the Egyptian rule under the Ptolemies. This is what we're going to kind of speed through. But we're going to just give some of the highlights in this. So after Alexander, you had there was no heir. And so the land and the conquest that he had, the land that he had taken was divided first into 4 parts, and then later on into 3 parts. So all of that land that you saw up there was divided into 4 parts and then to 3 parts. Finally, 2 parts swallowed the whole. It was divided into half. And here's some great history for you, the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. The northern half was based in Syria, and that was under the Seleucid control. And then the southern half was based in Egypt and was under Ptolemaic. And they started adopting the title of Ptolemy. So, from 311 on, Israel was in the hands of the Ptolemies. All right, up to this point. It was securely in the land of the Ptolemies. And during this time, it was a period of relative freedom for the Jews. They weren't, the Ptolemies were in control, but they could pretty much do the things that they wanted to do. And they had a good standard of living. And the most famous and powerful of all the Ptolemies that lived was Ptolemy III. They just kept the same name, as we're going to see with the Herods later on. And he promoted a lot of scientific innovation. Now this is where it gets interesting to me. This is where we're going to start slowing down a little bit. So in 198 BC, so here they are. Here it is. You see where Israel is split right down the middle. The north and the south. So in 198 BC, the Seleucid ruler of Antiochus III conquered and occupied Israel. He took over Israel. And it shifted balance from the south down here to the north. This is where things start going south, even though it's in the north. He limited freedom and self-government for Israel. This is Antiochus III. He conquered and occupied Israel, and now he limited freedom and self-government. In other words, all right, you guys have been on your own. You've been used to doing it the way you want to do it. Well, not anymore. I'm in charge now. This is how it's going to be. And for the next several decades, the Jews were subject to Syria rather than to Egypt. And you wonder why there's trouble in the Middle East. This goes all the way back to this. So, like I say, he limited freedom and self-government for Israel. But he also wanted to keep on friendly terms with Romans because they were getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So Antiochus IV, after him, came into power in 175, and that cordial relationship really began to change. Let me tell you some of the things that he did. I don't know if this is on your answer sheet or not, but he increased taxes. What's the first way to get people upset? Raise their taxes. And he began to promote Hellenization. Again, you know what Hellenization is now. He began to promote that. What are Jewish people who are striving to keep Jewish customs, Jewish religion, Jewish dress? What are they going to think when there's immodest dress? Some of the plays and some of the theaters, because of Hellenization, were being involved in by people of their own faith. What are righteous people going to think about that? They're not going to like it, are they? So, those, quote, faithful Jews who were against Hellenization really began to get riled up during this time. This is where it really starts to shift. There was a false report spread throughout Jerusalem that Antiochus had been killed in Egypt. And guess what guess what the Jews did in the streets? They rejoiced in the streets. But remember, it was a false report. And so when Antiochus heard what the Jews had done, he pilfered the temple, and he took the equivalent of billions of dollars of sacred objects from the temple. And this next part, they don't know historically if it was historically true or if he was just boasting and bragging, and he brought up the number, but he said he killed 40,000 Jews in one day. Now, whether that's an accurate number or not, we don't know. That could be embellished. But needless to say, there was a lot of them killed. So these Jews found out that he had been killed. So they start partying in the streets, being joyful. He finds out about it. And he raids the temple, pilfers it, takes those sacred objects to the Jews. And then he has so many of them killed. As a matter of fact, look at Daniel chapter 11. Greg may have covered this in his class. Okay. I don't feel so bad for being as slow as I am in this. Daniel 11, 31 through 35. Many of the Jews attributed it to this. And forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. Those who do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt with flattery, and it goes on from there. But that's Daniel chapter 11, 31 through 35. So this was kind of the attitude during this time. And you can just imagine and this is what I like to do as I read things like this, is, I don't know what it was like to be a Jew in, 200 BC. I don't know what it was like to be taken from my homeland and then have these invaders come in, and you've got another group of invaders every 1 to 200 years, and they're always trying to change things, always trying to get us to change our customs. We want to do things the way we want to do them, and everybody's trying to tell us what to do. These foreigners don't belong in here anyway. So I don't know what it was like to be during that time, but if I think about what it would be like if that happened right now, and I have an idea, I know how I would react. I wouldn't like it. Whoever our arch enemy is now, Russia back in the 80s, I wouldn't have liked it if they would have come in and started doing these things. Especially if they raise our taxes, they promote a whole different way of living than what I'm used to and what I believe to be right. If they start ransacking our church buildings, and I realize, there's nothing sacred about this place. Some beautiful things take place here, but we could do it as well out in the parking lot as we could inside. I'm so glad we have a place inside to do this. But if people started coming in and started raiding these church buildings, and then thousands of Christians were killed, I think my dander might be up a little bit. What about you? Well, this leads to this. The Maccabean revolt and the Hasmonean dynasty from 167 to 63 BC. We're getting closer now, aren't we? We're getting closer to the life of Christ. It's so difficult to try to put this in a nutshell. We're dealing with 100 years in a 35-minute class. You're not going to get the full story. But let me try to tell you. So this was the attitude. This is what was taking place. Everything that I just described, these were the things that were taking place. Well, then there was an aged priest named Matthias, I guess. Matthias. He was ordered to sacrifice on one of the unlawful altars that Antiochus had set up. He set it up in a small town northeast of Judea. And since it was not authorized, he refused to do it. And when a fellow Jew came forward to carry out the king's orders, this priest slew both the man who came forward to do it and the guard who was watching them. So imagine that. Now, again, we don't advocate violence, but if you found out that, hey, we're going to make you do something that goes against your beliefs, that man refuses to do it, but some other person who's supposed to be of the same faith as you said, well, I'll do it. If he won't do it, I'll do it. And then this guy kills him and the guard that's guarding them both. Would you be tempted at least? Yeah. Well, after he had done that, he he and his 5 sons fled to the Judean hill country, and they organized a band of outlaws, of rebel Jews. And he and his sons would surprise the Syrian forces. They would attack them using guerrilla warfare, and were devastating this much larger army by surprise attacks. They would go in there, attack, and then go back to the hill country. Then they would come in another area, attack, go back to the hill country. So now you're getting reports. This fella and his boys, not only did they do it this one time, but now they're going in. And they're this occupying force that's raising our taxes, trying to force us in a different way of living, going against our beliefs. Now, they're coming in every once in a while in different places, and this great big Syrian army that's just so invincible in their own eyes, they're taking them down and making them look like mice. You think legend would start to grow? That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. So it began to grow. Well, Matthias died in 166 BC, but his son Judas, who was nicknamed Maccabæus, he continued these attacks. Does anybody know, and I think this is one of the questions, what the word Maccabæus means? It's from the Greek, and it means the hammer. That'd be all right. A hammer. There's an attorney up when we drive to Indiana, and I tell you, I'm not exaggerating. 25, 30 billboards, all in a row on I-70, and it's call the hammer. You know, did you get injured by a truck driver? Call the hammer, and he'll put the hammer down. Well, here's the real life hammer, Maccabæus. If anybody wants to start calling me the hammer, that'd be all right with me. I don't expect that to start happening anytime. Well, he continued leading these attacks. So he picked up where his father had left off. And, now listen to this. This is important. He succeeded in regaining control of the temple precincts. So those precincts around the temple, they were so strong, and the band grew and grew and grew, and more people were taking part in these sneak attacks, that he took control of the temple precincts and purified the sanctuary. Now that's a victory, isn't it? This important time when he was able to do this, the hammer was able to do this. They celebrated the liberation of foreign rule, and it's still celebrated today by the Jews. Anybody want to know, guess what the name of this is? Hanukkah. This is why they celebrate Hanukkah. Because I don't read about that in the Bible. How come? Well, we do, but it's called a different name. We're going to look at that too. But they still celebrate that today. It's the Feast of Dedication. Look at John chapter 10, verse 22. Now it was the Feast of Dedication in Jerusalem, and it was winter, and Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. So this is something that they still celebrate today. And here's why. And I want you to think about that. Everybody listen to this. I know we've covered a lot of history, and I don't expect us to remember all of this. I think you'll probably remember the hammer. But this is the important part. He did not remove all the Syrian forces. It wasn't like he drove them all away and they all gave up. But those sneak attacks, killing some, and doing great deeds, purifying the temple, the sanctuary of the temple, and the precincts of the temple. But he did force the Syrians to negotiate a peace. So they did get some gains in this. And so Antiochus, who died in 164, and his successor Antiochus V, were prepared to treat the Jews a lot more fairly. And then Rome also sent a letter at this time. Because of all of these things taking place, all right, how can we stop these people from doing what they're doing? They were pests at the beginning, but now they're really starting to take a toll. What can we do? All right, Jews, you wanted your freedoms. We're going to give you that. The Romans even said, hey, there's going to be peace with us. Everything's going to be okay. You guys just start behaving yourself. But here's the thing. These times, the Maccabean revolt ushered in 80 years of independence. And it's known as the Golden Age of Jewish nationalism. Still considered to be the Golden Age of Jewish nationalism. Well, Rome in 63 ended that period. It was 80 years. But now think about this. This is what I want you to pay attention to. The Jews would never again live in Israel as a free, entirely self-governing people until, anybody want to take a guess? Some of you know. 1947, 1948, the end of World War II. So think about that. The Jews, for those 80 years, the golden time for the Jews, would not have that same freedom and self-governing ability until the end of World War II, when it became a state. Isn't that amazing? For all those years, it's been in existence, but they've never been free. So, let's look at some texts here now. Look at Acts chapter 22. This Maccabean revolt, and you can just imagine, again, we're trying to put ourselves in that situation. Acts 22. I'm not going to read all of this, but let's read some of this so we can kind of get the picture here of what's taking place. And when you look at the life of Jesus, how could the Pharisees be so hateful? How could they be so dogmatic? He eats with sinners. How could the Jews be so hateful to Paul? What is that? And Peter, you wait. You went in and you slept in the house of a Gentile? What's your problem? We're Jews. We don't act like Gentiles. We're free. We deserve our freedom. And then when we lose our freedom, we're bitter about it. Look at Acts chapter 22, starting with verse 3. I'm indeed a Jew, born in Tarsus of... why is he bringing this up, do you think? That's right. Go down now, drop down just a little bit. Verse 19. So I said, Lord, they know that in every synagogue I imprisoned you, beat those who believe on you, and when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, consenting to his death, and guarding the clothes of those who were killing him. Then he said to me, depart, for I will send you far from here to the Gentiles. And then watch the next verse. And they listened to him until this word. What word? Gentiles. And then they raised their voices and said, away with such a fellow from the earth, for he is not fit to live. So think about that. You're going to tell us, all right, of your conversion. I'm a Jew. I was born a Jew. I kept the law. I was converted, and here's how I was converted. And boy, they were just hanging on every word. Came with me, and even those, when they killed Stephen, I was there, and I watched the coats and all of this. And then depart from me, I will send you far from here to the Gentiles. And they listened to him until this word. Why were they so bitter when he said he was going to go to the Gentiles? No, we don't have anything to do with them. Those are the invading forces. By this time, the Romans were there. We're Jews. We act like Jews. We think like Jews. We dress like Jews. And here you are going to go teach them like you would teach one of us? Look at Acts chapter 21. Acts chapter 21, verse 40. Just trying to get us the mindset. And this is going to be the time in which Jesus was born. This Maccabean revolt and all of this. Then the Romans. We're going to get to the Romans. It looks like it'll be next week. But this is the attitudes. These are the attitudes. Verse 40, Acts 21, verse 40. So when he had given him permission, Paul stood on the stairs and motioned with his hand to the people. And when there was a great silence, he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, saying, Brethren and fathers, hear my defense before you now. And when they heard that he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, they kept all the more silent. So why does him speaking in Hebrew mean anything? It makes him one of them. Makes him one of them. If I got up here and started telling you or speaking in Russian, even if you could understand it, now, Mark, you're not a Russian, you're an American. So, but if I start speaking to you in English, especially American English, you know, the British don't think we speak English. They're probably right. But you see, with that mindset, they would listen to him when he would speak to them. And then that next one, where they listened to him until he mentioned the word Gentile. So this independence, as you can imagine, was just increasing Israel's desire. And this is the important part, and this is where we're going to have to end tonight. But it just intensified their desire. We want a king again. We want leadership again. And it was at a fever pitch by the 1st century A.D. That's important too. What were they always trying to do with Jesus? Make him a king. This is what we've been looking for. You think they were looking for a king for all the spiritual reasons? No. Right. We want to be free again. We want to kill our enemies. And we want to live the way we want to live. So, let me just finish this up because then we can start with the Romans. After Judas and his brothers died, it went to one of his brothers named John Hyrcanus. And that goes all the way from 134 to 104. He devoted his reign to trying to expand the territory. He also set the stage for increased antagonism between the Jews and the Samaritans that carried over into the New Testament. One of the things that he did, he destroyed a temple of the Samaritans that they had built on Mount Gerizim. John chapter 4 comes to mind, doesn't it? Why were they so surprised? He was talking to a Samaritan and a woman. And what was with her attitude? You Jews say, I can almost see her head shaking. You Jews say, but we worship on this mountain. See, there's just background, and it just brings, I think, the Bible out. We're going to get next week, Lord willing, into the Roman period, and this is what will bring us into the birth of Jesus Christ. I can't wait to talk a little bit more about the Herods. Those two handouts I gave you tonight tells about the Herods, and you can read that, and if you keep it all straight, then let's switch spots and you can teach. But there's going to be 3 Herods that we're going to drill into our minds, because that will really play a key. Which Herod is Jesus dealing with in this location? So, all right, let's get ready to have our devotional. Praise God with our singing, hear a portion of His words, and talk to our Father together.